my fellow fanboys and fangirls, and welcome to another installment of Julz Chan's Comic Corner, where I give you my thoughts on the latest comic books to hit the shelves, and then listen as all of you start furiously type away at your keyboards. Today we are talking about Action Comics. Again, yeah, for those who don't know, as part of DC's Rebirth event, the company thought it was necessary to publish each of their comics twice a month, thus making it harder for reviewers like me to keep up. And I can only imagine dozens of writers over at DC Comics are crying themselves to sleep at night. For my thoughts on the previous issue of Action Comics, please check out my previous video, and remember to comment, like, and subscribe, and to follow more of my work on the Outerhaven.net. Now, on to Action Comics, issue 961! Almost there to 1,000 issues, you guys! Now, admittedly, when I first read this issue, I thought it was amazing, but after rereading it and reevaluating my thoughts, I found several problems. The comic felt like it needed to play keep away with the story. Now let's talk about the story, and we'll talk about what's good first before we move on to what's bad. There was still a level of enjoyment and a lot of standout moments. For example, Wonder Woman and Superman fighting off Doomsday for a bit, and Clark not needing to worry about holding back since he's far away from the city. That in particular was significant, since most people tend to forget that it is a well-known tactic for Superman to go outside of the city, take the fight somewhere else so that way other people don't get hurt, and then cut loose. Or it used to be a well-known tactic. Thanks, Man of Steel and BVS, now go away. However, the fight doesn't feel all that intense, at least during the second half of the fight. When Wonder Woman, Lois, and John were around, there was major tension at the time. During the first half of the fight, Doomsday could have possibly hurt them, and I was actually really concerned for John since Doomsday was targeting him. Although I find it rather questionable that Lois and John decided to stay instead of, run. Really, Lois, that's some bad parenting right there. It just felt like the writer needed them to stay so we could have one more emotional moment between Clark and his family, even though we already had that last issue. We really didn't need this scene, as sweet as it was, and I'll talk about that more in a bit. Again, the action was pretty good. One moment in particular that really stood out to me was when Doomsday took Diana's lasso of truth, wrapped it around Clark's neck, and tried to strangle him with it. I really got scared there for a moment, and I actually thought Doomsday was gonna decapitate him with the lasso. It's something I don't think we've ever seen before. But of course, Superman is saved by his son John, who gives Doomsday a big ol' blast of heat vision. The comic does at least try to do something new with the action, which is something I can give it praise for. Although, while there were some good aspects to this comic, there were also some bad. Action can only get you so far in a comic, people, but the real substance to any story is going to be the story itself. The downside is that the story was getting somewhere near the end, but then it stopped and just made me frustrated. Near the end, the cloaked figure guy finally does something other than commentate on the battle. He sends some henchmen to go and try and subdue Doomsday and help Superman, which really bothered me when the comic just ended right then and there. We could have gotten some insight as to who this guy is and why is he watching Superman or something, but nope, the comic just had to end right then and there. Also, the story wasted its time during the start by focusing on Lex Luthor and New 52 Clark Kent just to remind us that they exist. Oh, and the cameo by Superwoman. And by cameo, I mean a red and blue streak. Yeah, we really needed to plug in Superwoman for this. More time could have been devoted to the comic's actual story, but instead readers got a story that was cut before it could go somewhere. You could have cut out a whole bunch of scenes like the opening scene with Lex and lose nothing of value, and as touching as Clark's moments were with his family, we could have cut that out too and furthered the actual plot. When I was writing this review, a friend of mine told me that it felt like the start of the New 52 all over again, taking forever to introduce everybody and taking forever for the story to go anywhere. And I kind of agree. The only difference is I don't hate anybody here. However, despite the fact that I don't hate anybody in this, it's been mostly our heroes fighting Doomsday, and it feels like it's taking forever for the actual story to progress, and elements like the green hooded figure guy and the New 52 Clark Kent who was mysteriously resurrected have barely been touched upon. I really wouldn't call the story in on itself terrible. There are a lot of good ideas here. It's just that it's frustrating that it's taking forever to get anywhere, and it's being hindered by this whole publishing twice a month thing. Let's move on to characters. Although there isn't really that much in the way of character development here, or anything else that we haven't already seen, There is a scene where Lex sadly comments on the destruction of Metropolis, the city that he helped build, but in all honesty, it's very brief and hardly worth noting. It does paint him in a bit of a sympathetic light, but knowing Lex, it's more about crying over a project that he invested from a business person's perspective, not so much that he cares about the city. And even if he does care about the city, Lex and sympathy are rarely in the same sentence. And while I did say the emotional moments between Clark and his family were not needed since we had them last issue, I did like the scene where Clark kissed Lois, told John not to worry that he'll be okay, and then flew back into battle while shedding a tear. That was pretty powerful, I can't deny that at all. It's really something that does hit you in the feels. It illustrates the pain and heartbreak he's feeling of having to leave his family to go fight a dangerous threat. A dangerous threat that could most likely kill him. However, I still maintain that you could have cut this scene out in order to make room for more story for this issue, and actually just put this scene at the end of last issue. I kind of wondered that, and this would definitely remove the feeling of repetition. Cue all the Man of Steel and BVS fanboys calling me an emotionless critic who looks at everything dispassionately and telling me how, "You don't understand, dude, plot does not matter so long as you get swelled up in emotions and feelings." Despite the fact that I already admitted that I liked these scenes and just said that, we could just put them somewhere else instead of here and actually made room for more story stuff. And also, don't forget that despite anything that you may feel, story structure is the heart, lungs, and brain of any piece of work. The art is still good, still very strong. It had a few problems, but nothing too major. The action is illustrated in a way that is paced very well for the most part. We see the fight scene in a very detailed way in a few shots. We see the wind-up, and then the pitch, and then the impact to each action. For example, Doomsday picks up Wonder Woman's sword. He throws it. We see it going right for John, and then it gets intercepted by Diana. More action scenes need to be paced like this. Most of the time, they tend to be one powerful pose after another, and it's boring. When you see action scenes put out in better detail and see everything connect, it's much more visually interesting. Again, overall, I want to stress that the comic is still okay, but it could have been so much better. There were things that could have been cut out, and we could have had more room for the actual story. Yes, there was good action. Yes, there were good character moments, but there was a level of repetition, and we really did not need that. There are good ideas here, and I trust that Dan Jurgens knows what he's doing, and I wanted to like this issue, but more could have been done. My rating for this issue is a 3 out of 5. But that could just be me. Perhaps others may not see it the same way I do, and I could really see somebody enjoying this comic. Alright, that's all the time I have. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you thought about the comic in the comments below. Please remember to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and please support my work via Patreon, especially if you want to see more of this. This show, I mean. And if you can, please support the work of my fellow content creators on the Outerhaven's Patreon page. See you guys later, and remember, stay fantastic.